Yeah, I did this talk in February at an event called BASE. So they stand for Black and African Solidarity Show. And so they don't just do like just the arts, like you can share your research or your presentations. And I kind of wanted to talk about the experience that I had with imposter syndrome. And this is going to actually be a bit like a shocker, because right in the middle, we're going to get to like how I personally started to overcome that. And it's actually through, do you know what, it's a spice. Yeah, I'll see it. I'll see it. But since everyone's here, can we just have a mini icebreaker? If ever, I'm gonna try to see. Yeah, cool. I can see who's there now. Yeah. I'm just gonna point at people and just kind of say like your name, where you're from in London, and kind of like what has brought you here. Like, do you want to kind of understand what imposter syndrome is, or if you've had it, or is it more towards the blackness part of like, okay, what does that mean? Just in like a sentence or two, just to kind of get everyone comfortable. I'm going to start with, oh, Shana, because you're not on mute.
Yeah, I think with everything going on at the moment, there's been a lot of self-reflection. And I think for me, growing up with a white mum and being around a predominantly white area and stuff, I think it's something I've never really addressed. And I think this period is kind of bringing it out a lot in me, and definitely something I want to learn more about, and also kind of just figure out within myself, I guess, a bit. So a bit of both. But yeah, from London as well, guys.
Thank you. Daniela?
I'm Daniela, obviously. I'm not from London, I'm from Manchester, and I have a basic level of understanding about imposter syndrome, and I think I definitely do experience it from time to time. I feel like that's the experience of Black people, really, like Black women especially. And I'm all for Black people, Black identities. So when I see Unapologetically Black, I'm gonna be there. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm here as well. And I know Penny, by the way. That's who sent me the link.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you. Penny?
Hi guys, I'm Penny. Like Daniela, I'm from Manchester. I think imposter syndrome is something that I've struggled with quite a lot. From like Miss Uganda, from now, and I think I'm at an age where there's great things that are happening to me, but I guess like I don't believe. Not even I guess it's that not believing in myself and that whole. I always question myself, so I think this is very interesting, and like I just love the work that you do. So yeah.
Thank you, Penny. Yeah, so guys, Penny was Miss Uganda UK 2018. Oh my god, I get it.
Yeah.
18? 18.
Yes, 18.
18. And I was 15, so I like saw her win and everything. So it was just amazing. Tessa, sorry, I'm talking.
Hi, I don't really know what to say. Yeah, I also have like just like a basic level of understanding of imposter syndrome, and I do have tendencies of it. Yeah, about myself. I'm just a creative. I'm a writer, creative director, all-round creative. So it's definitely like a thing, especially in the creative industry. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. And figure out, I'll call you after, I didn't know that. Nathan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, thank God, thank God. So obviously I'm Nathan. I'll put on my camera soon, innit? Just obviously right now I'm trying to like order some food in it. I don't embarrass myself and all of that. But I'm self-proclaimed Mr. Uganda every year, all day. Basically, yeah, so I'm from Essex, innit? But I live near Manchester now. And I'm basically interested in this because I grew up around quite a lot of people that were kind of had, I don't know, lost their identity in a sense, especially growing up in Essex. So I'm trying to understand why that is, because I suppose me and my friends were all like Black, so we're just very unapologetically Black type of thing.
Okay.
Like, I'm the same way at work as well. Like I'm just blackity black. So yeah, just interested to see in it, to learn something, really.
Thank you. I'd love to see what you've got to say when I ask some questions later on. And then Jojo, my guy. Oh.
You muted me.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I'm Jojo. hope you can all hear me. I'm calling in from Uganda, and yeah, it's practically late. It's like 9 p.m. here, so I can't turn my video on, but I will be listening in. And well, as a creative, I'm a graphic designer and a Christian creative. It's basically, I feel like I need to empower people with everything I do. So I basically use my work to push people to be better, not to push myself. So based on what's going on now, how we're being treated. Okay, personally in Uganda, you can't really experience it, so you can't really know how it feels like to be away from home. But if I did live home, I would want to have a great experience, an A-class experience. That's why I'm like, it would be good to know, get insights, get educated, and yeah, we talk on self-identity and self-awareness. It's always a great thing to be in.
Yeah, it's my favorite. Okay, amazing. Thank you for everyone's contributions and the differences and stuff. So just before, well, not just before, so we're going to start now. So who am I? When you hear those questions, what words come to mind? What sentence comes to mind? If someone just says, who am I? You don't have to mention it, but you can put it in the chat if you'd like. What's funny is that depending on our experiences and our space, we could think of features, characteristics, values, what you love to do. But I think obviously your ethnicity, what you do for your job. But when you actually resonate, you actually realize that your identity and who you are is very multifaceted, and actually your experiences can impact your identity. And this is important because later on we're going to be talking about how there are shifts in identity. But as we know, when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to visibility, there are key features that we learn to embrace because it's in our DNA, it's in our environment, right? But there are also some people that are in that self and development journey where you still don't actually know who you are, and that's fine. You're finding that out. So the main reason to ask that question is to actually realize in the beginning of this talk, like, oh, actually, wow, it's multifaceted, and we're going to talk about that later. Before I blabber on at you, I was going to just speak about me really, really quickly. So as you can see, the first thing that you see when you meet me is that I'm a woman, pronoun she, and I'm Black. I can't get away with that. That's who I am. But there's also these things that I love to do. There are these things that I work. So I started working as a researcher at Parliament, and this is very important because I had to address a lot of imposter syndrome before I got here. And it's like life prepared me, like God prepared me, because I don't think that I would have coped in Parliament without acknowledging that I had suffered from imposter syndrome. So we're going to talk about all of that after. And you know that I'm a speaker, but I used to have a really, really bad stutter. So even conquering that was difficult because the imposter syndrome was coming from all angles of like mental health, with my stutter, not feeling good enough, society, and then my visual, like an identity. The reason why I mentioned multifaceted is because we're going to be talking a lot about the theory of intersectionality. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it was made by a Black lady called Kimberly Crenshaw, and she talks about how social identities can be barriers through how you navigate through the world. And the reason why it's important to identify the different social identities is because it helps you understand how you can navigate, how someone else navigates, and you can appreciate your privilege, their privilege, right? So for example, even though I'm a Black female, which we all know, we've seen on socials, there are barriers systematically, unconsciously in people and in our own personal practices, right? Like how you self-value yourself. But then there's also understanding my environment. So I understand that my privilege is that I actually may, for example, I work in Parliament, right? So I've been able to access a certain level of information. I've got a full-time job, but the barriers that I have to navigate through, I'm aware of. So I just wanted to bring that up because we can see how culture will come into play with our identity. And the most important thing is we're already struggling with structural violence. I don't think you guys know what that means, but it's how the system puts barriers in place for certain people to find it harder to succeed. We are already going through that. And as a Black woman or of mixed heritage or of BAME, we ourselves we are trying to respond to those identities that the world has put on us already, those preconceived stereotypes, right? Those preconceived notions, those things that we're told while we're younger that we have to work twice as hard. All of those notions, we ourselves are battling with that. Hey Sam, we're battling with that, but we're also going on that journey that I mentioned earlier, finding ourselves. So how do we come to terms with who we are when we're also trying to fight that narrative? And that's why imposter syndrome actually, I feel like, comes because there's this imbalance, especially if you've not been taught from young in school about self-awareness, self-identity. That's one thing that I'm passionate about with my project, talking about self-awareness, self-development. How can we actually teach ourselves through self-education? So imposter syndrome, you've probably heard of it. For me, it's really important because you acknowledge that one area of imposter syndrome comes from self-doubt, and self-doubt can eat you up from the inside out. Imposter syndrome has been shown that you have the symptoms of like doubting yourself, feeling can't say the word, messed up, inadequate, even though you are worthy of the credit, you are worthy of doing the work. And for me, my main imposter syndrome was probably in university. I almost dropped out of my master's twice. Like I was just like, I don't fit in. My master's was in global public health and policy. I stutter. For those of you that don't know, and I was like studying with doctors, pharmacists, nurses, just so many bright, intelligent people. And no matter how much I passed, no matter how much my lecturers told me you're great, when I would talk up, I'd feel like, oh my gosh, like that just sounded so stupid. Like that sounded so stupid. And it started to impact my confidence so much that that whole year, I don't think that I did any talks. I struggled when I was like trying to apply for jobs. And the thing is that confidence showed because I didn't get any of those jobs that year, like literally. And I didn't realize that it was imposter syndrome. Then I remember going to Switzerland on one of the trips, and we went to the UN, we went to the World Health Organization. And I remember like being scared to ask questions, but I'm naturally so like nosy. So I'd ask, and then I'd ask my friends, oh my God, does that sound stupid? Or like I would just literally not think that I was capable. And then I would even cry. Like I remember storming out after a talk that we had to do because of obviously like we're like students and stuff. And I was going to speak about maternal health. And so my stutter that day was out of the roof, and I stormed out crying. I cried myself to sleep. I was crying. And I just felt like, why am I here? And it's sorry that I'm going on so much, but it's because it's through that journey of acknowledging, okay, what is this that I'm going through? And then I found out it's imposter syndrome. And a lot of it did come from my background. I felt like I shouldn't be there because they looked at me as this young, Black woman. I'm not very educated. I came straight from uni, like no experience. And then also a lot of my colleagues were quite wealthy. They had come from like all over the world. I'm from like a working class background. And so I felt the need to overcompensate. And that's the extra stress that we put on ourselves because we're trying to fight these preconceived images. So I already thought that everyone would think that I'm a certain way or sound a certain way. Then the reason why I put cultural assimilation there is because there's a film that I saw, a clip of, there's actually, I don't know her name, but she talks about how it's very rare for us to acknowledge that living in the Western world, we have actually assimilated to a dominant culture. This is not negative, it's not bad, it's not anything like I'm saying it's evil, but there is mental health impacts to this. And I'm going to mention that in a study that I came across afterwards. And so there was a talk that I had in December 2018, bearing in mind I had no idea what imposter syndrome was or what cultural assimilation was, but I was speaking about self-love, and I said, I don't think as young Black women or young people of color that we've actually gone home and actually realized, okay, at home I'm navigating a certain way, I'm thinking more culturally, I'm being respectful, I'm speaking in a certain way, just certain things that you're doing and you're practicing because you're in your home and you're in your culture. And then you leave your house and you have to have this multi-dimensional lens of how to navigate through society. And I'm telling you, I had never stopped and actually thought, there's a mental health impact to this. I know that it's probably even measured somewhere, but we need to address this and talk about this, and talk about the fact that actually I'm going through that because I'm having to assimilate to a dominant culture. Not that it's negative, but like I said, it's a dominant culture of society. It's in the smallest things. It's in my language. How many of us speak more white on the phone? All of us. We all act all posh, like hello. It's just there are so many filters that we're putting on, and yeah. Oh, it wasn't this slide I was supposed to talk about. Sorry. In 2009, there was a study that showed that students that were going through the cultural assimilation had higher risks of mental health problems, and that in 2017 in the University of Texas, BAME students that were high performing, so they were in the higher quartile, I think it was, actually showed higher in imposter syndrome symptoms, and they actually had the Black students had reported higher levels of anxiety and depression and discrimination. So the people that are feeling discriminated against are feeling more depressed, more anxious, and still they're actually performing higher. So they're still getting those feelings, but they're of that value. So the mental health impact is what I really wanted to address, because we're fighting a dilemma of fitting in and standing out. But in standing out, you require that confidence. So how do you build up that confidence? But before I go on, does anyone else want to share any key moments where they thought, what is this feeling? Is it imposter syndrome? Does anyone want to share what they went through before we go on? Talk a lot. Try to listen. Anyone? Oh, what did I do? Faye, do you want to go? I saw a thumbs up.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, baby girl. How are you?
I'm okay. Sorry, I joined a bit late because my Zoom had to update. Thank you so much for this, and hi everyone. My name's Faye. So I want to share a story from uni. I think so. I went to the same uni as Natasha, and first year and second year of university, I hated going to my seminars. I felt out because I studied history as well. It was mainly especially first year and second year, it was mainly white. There were either northerners. There were not a lot of London white people, and I think it's quite different when I guess we grow up with the white Londoners as well, so it feels a bit different. And also I went to a very multicultural college, sixth form and secondary school. So when I went to university, I just felt out of place. Like if I was 5 minutes late, I would literally miss the whole seminar, even if it was like 2-3 hours, because I couldn't face everyone watching me. And because I was that Black girl, I felt like, for some reason as well, I felt like I was the representative of all Black people.
Yeah, that
so
burden.
I felt like there's a burden on me. I'm like, now they're gonna think this, like, this typical Black girl coming in late, all of that, because I felt the stereotype that they had in their head. Oh, it's not that they said it, but I have this preconceived ideas of how these people see me. So obviously, if I went in, even not reading, if I didn't do the readings, I felt out of place. Like, I hated going to my seminars, and consequently, that affected my grades and everything. Thankfully, the last year, I sort of I had to get through it. So I had to make a decision. I was like, listen, I'm going to either go and speak to these lecturers, and I didn't speak to them about how I felt. I meant, even if I had a question about my seminar or anything, I would never ask. I didn't ask. I spent 2 years without asking, without approaching my lecturers. All the questions, if I did it, I did it. Some of them I missed, the due dates. I just felt like I don't know, I felt out of place. And so the last year I had to make a decision. I was like, okay, right, we ain't got time to feel sorry for ourselves. So I had to get through that. So it was very hard. And that's my story.
Now I know exactly what you mean, especially because in that environment of academia, it's not easy to recognize these feelings, but it's just this feeling of out of place. Even though you know you got the grades to get in there, you are intelligent, you pass all your exams. So it's like, what is that feeling? So yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that, because I had that all throughout university. Danielle wanted to share something before we move on. Go ahead, darling.
An example of imposter syndrome was sort of in my final year. I have this job where like an ambassador, like a BAME ambassador, and I have to kind of, well, when we're still like in uni, I had to sort of talk for the BAME students, for Black, Asian, minority, ethnic students, in like faculty meetings, and like I'd go and have to talk to like the inclusion and diversity like officers of the faculty or the departments. And sometimes, you know, I'd have to obviously say something because I'm sort of the BAME ambassador, supposedly like you know, talking on behalf of students, right, of color, that and about their issues and stuff like that. And sometimes I'd be in that space and I'd be talking whatever I'm saying, and it's like it would be like I basically I just didn't feel like qualified to be there, even though I had gone through sort of the process of I had got the job by the things that I'd said, and I had, you know, prepared the things I've written that had been approved sort of by the people that I was, you know, my colleagues and my manager and all that kind of stuff. And even afterwards, like the meeting people, so like whoever I was talking to, whether they were faculty heads or like the heads of departments, whatever, they would come and they would say, oh wow, that's so interesting, you spoke really well, etc, etc. But in my head, I'd still be going home thinking like, oh my god, I bet I sounded literally what you said, right? I felt like I sounded so stupid, or I had made a mistake somewhere there, or I'd paused for what felt like ages, even though like it really wasn't. And obviously like I didn't speak that badly because I had got the job for a reason, you know. So like that's like an example of when I felt imposter syndrome recently. Yeah,
I think there's so much power in realizing that we actually all go through that, and that it is something that we need to address. Which brings me to the next point. Okay, now I know what it is. I know what everyone's going through. What do I do about it? So these are some solutions that I've quickly put on, but we're going to go into them deeper. And this is what I kind of went through a lot, like last summer, when I started really trying to develop Manifesting Legacy, my project, when I started to do it with young children, and the stuff that they were saying, it was like breaking my heart. I was like, little kids are smart, like they know what's going on, but they just can't articulate it. So that's when I starting to develop my own personal development, and then I could therefore share it with people. So the first step would be self recognition and awareness. Self-awareness and reflection are so broad. They're really large concepts, and we're going to dig deep into them later. But just being able to be mindful of yourself is so important. Being able to sit down and reflect and acknowledge the emotions. Why am I feeling this way? And deciphering it. So, for example, when you and I left feeling really, really stupid, instead of staying on that point of, oh my god, I feel really, really stupid, dissecting that. Why do I feel stupid? Okay, what is actually fact and what is my thoughts, and breaking it down step by step. And that's an example of self-awareness. But let's not forget that self-awareness is something that is ongoing, and there are so many layers to ourselves. Like I mentioned earlier, we're still learning who we are, and so it's an ongoing journey. Then breaking the silence, seeking support and community. That was major for me when I learned to start speaking about my vulnerability. The strength that I got, and I know that most of us here have like heard of that, like the paradox of how the vulnerability is your strength. And that's one thing that I've definitely been able to admit since even prior to realizing that I had imposter syndrome with my speech, but now with my being, my entire being, my race, my brain, my intelligence, just all of it. And then also there's a thing called I can't say it right. Can't say the word. Oh my gosh, sorry guys. when you're in a community that's like-minded, you start to develop a collective consciousness, right? So consciousness whereby you are in a group, and once you're aware of things, you're trying to change the narrative. You're trying to change your community because you're all like-minded. You're all working towards, okay, I know that my community, around here, I'm not really that in depth, but for example, if I talk about the Uganda community, I'm very involved, and I've seen a lot of young Black women that maybe have struggled with self-love, and so like a lot of the stuff that I've done in Uganda, even back home and here, I do a lot of work on like self-love, on like personal development. So seeing what is needed in the community and collectively working towards that goal, and then from there, the consciousness of certain things will like rise. Then acknowledgement through self-worth, through self-care. I know we hear about it all the time, but people actually underestimate self-care. It's from the smallest things to the biggest things. So for example, today, I was really nervous. Like I mentioned earlier, I was really, really nervous. And so I had to eat what I like. I had to put on music that gives me energy. I had to sit in the sun. I love the sunshine. I had to like just like knowing what's going to make me feel good, what's going to release the endorphins. And then through self-care, you're just slowly doing practices that build up your self-worth. There's also practices that you can do for self-worth, and we're going to go through that. We're going to do something called the identity shift questions, and that comes into mindfulness and emotional intelligence. That's also there on that list. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then lastly, the emotional trauma consciousness healing. So as you guys may know, or may not know, trauma can actually be passed down into ungenerationally. So it's called epigenetic trauma. So your parents or your grandparents may pass down trauma in their DNA that is not expressed in genes, but it's still in your genome. And this is really, really important, and you can acknowledge this through self-awareness. So I did an emotional trauma healing online with a friend on like Zoom about 2 weeks ago, and it sounds really spooky right now, guys, but it's just consciousness and streaming where your body may feel trauma. And sometimes it's not just through what your trauma is, it's maybe passed down in DNA. This is scientific, by the way. You can go online, look at trauma, and the reason why this is so important is because we know as people of color, trauma has been mad, like colonialism, racism, we can go on for decades. Like, and even if you're not fully Black, if you're well, Black is, we'll talk about it in a minute, but no matter what heritage you are, basically, like I'm saying, like if we have come from backgrounds maybe where they have been immigrants, you know what I'm saying? Like there are all those traumas that you can actually address through being conscious and through being self-aware. So we're going to go into that further, but these are the 5 categories that we're going to have to memorize after. So I just want to put them into 5 words. So before we go on, I just want to remind everyone that your existence is a resistance, right? So you being aware of your body and your value is how you can resist the preconceived notions that may have been put out there, that make you feel like you are lesser than. So whoa, that's it. Sorry guys, I completely missed a slide. That was the wrong slide. Forgive me. Right. So what does it mean to be unapologetically Black? You hear these notions: Black girl magic, melanin magic, Black excellence. I think it's important to also remember, because I forgot to mention this earlier, but Black women in the States, for example, they are the most educated group in the whole like nation's demographic, but still they are people that have been exploited, victimized, and isolated in certain social circles. So what we've seen happen a lot in the States is people forming a social resistance, them telling themselves they are Black girl magic, them telling themselves I am Black, excellence, and then pushing through that that narrative that they are lesser than, them giving themselves that. And this is really, really important, because what actually determines Blackness, what I think is really important that we are noticing in this day and age is that Blackness cannot be defined by one thing. Blackness has been taken by us, by people of color, you know, to say, I am defining it as what we or what I want it to be. There are so many multifaceted layers. We are multi-dimensional beings, right? But the fact that race was put this, you know, to be a construct, I feel like we have deconstructed that and been like, I am me, and I am going to embrace what society has tried to place upon me. And then I also wanted to talk about the visionaries that have contributed to culture, because I think we can all admit culture is not static, it's always moving, right? Culture changes from year, day to day, etc. So we have to sit here and think, what are we contributing to culture? What are we contributing to our society, to what we deem as Blackness, what we would like to be? Because that's the one thing we have the control over, ourselves, right? And if we do want to deconstruct the system, it starts within ourselves, the organism, and then the organization. So I wanted to look at this clip just to remind you guys of the power that each person has in contributing to culture. And this was Google's ad for Black History Month this February. I don't know if you guys may have seen it, but it went viral. I love that ad. I like cried when I first watched it. I like tears. Yeah, the reason why I put that there is because what you'll see is common in all of these visionaries is that they dug deep, they found their passion, they found their self-worth, and they were able to use their Blackness as something that contributed to their ability to overcome. So their Blackness wasn't their definity. The Blackness didn't define them, but it was showing their ability to be able to be like, this is who I am, and I'm still going to exceed, I'm still going to succeed. That's obviously what I've interpreted. I don't know if you guys would agree, but that's what I've seen. It's an ability and not a definity, and that's why I think that the fact that Blackness reflects the multifaceted parts of people around the world unifying, there being a Blackness that has no borders. I think that is something that shows the unity of diversity, like Gilroy says. He's a philosopher based in the UK. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Your existence is a resistance. Be who you want to be, radiate your authentic essence, and just remember that your daily lifestyle is a daily protest. And this all comes back down to self-development. And it was these kind of notions that helped me to identify the imposter syndrome and then conquer it and overcome it. That was something I forgot it. Right. Be who you want to be. The law of resonance. We've all heard of the law of attraction and how you can attract what you want. But there was something that I was researching when I was looking at this kind of stuff, and it said the law of resonance is like how, so you know how we have Instagrams we have like an algorithm, right? So we start to get what we look at most and what we feed in most. It's the same with life. It's the same with the universe. It's the same with God. Like you feed in like what you're feeding, like what you're giving into, who you believe you are, who you want to be, the like frequencies that you're like living in. That is what feeds into your life. And so I think it's the same with imposter syndrome. Mine got worse when I wasn't believing in who I want to be, in who I am. And that comes back to what I said earlier about how your identity shifts depending on circumstances and experiences and your mindset. And I just wanted to highlight self-worth again with W.E.B. Underbois. You like, I cry about imposter syndrome, and can you imagine the challenges, the like mental impact that he had to overcome? And he still said that the honor. So when he went to Harvard and he was the first Black man to get a PhD, he said the honor, I assure you, was Harvard's. So that's just like, for me, I learn most from like life and experiences and people. And during this research, I was seeing that there are so many people that have probably been in the same circumstance, and they have come to overcome that experience. Now, when it comes to actual practical tools that I want us to take away from this, I wanted to narrow it down to emotional intelligence and mindfulness. Those are the things that, for me, that's how I measure my values. That's how I measure my growth. That's how I get in touch with me. Because as I mentioned earlier, we are multi-dimensional beings. We are mind, spirit, and body. And if we are not balancing all of these out to obviously overcome these barriers in life, these hardships, there's going to be a block, to growth. So, sorry. For those of you that don't know, emotional intelligence for me, I'm going to paraphrase from that definition. I kind of see it like, when you're able to understand your feelings, you can empathize with someone else's, read their feelings, and then also just be able to use that with wisdom with how to act. And the metaphor that I like to talk about is like clothes. So if I'm like really, really upset, I'm going to allow myself to feel that upsetness. So say that I want to wear a like brown jumper today. Let me wear it. Let me have that look. Let me feel it. But I'm not going to stay in that for 2 days, because it's going to start stinking. It's going to have stains on it. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm going to take it off and I'm going to wash it. That's how I see my emotions, right? I'm going to be able to experience it, understand why I'm feeling like that, but I'm not going to keep it on. I know that I have given myself time to understand why I feel sad or upset, but I'm not going to let it control me. And that's where the definition by Daniel Goleman comes from. He has a book called Emotional Intelligence, and he talks about how it's in 4 domains: self-awareness, self-management, empathy,